Hey there. Merry Christmas to everybody. Just wanted to do a quick video. Do I have the darn Christmas tree? Ah, there it is, okay. How do? See if I can put this a little closer. I'm still not used to using the GoPro. All right, there we go. Just want to do a quick little Christmas video for us. A little hat shot. Do a little Christmas video here. I'm in Old Ellicott City, and it is actually Christmas Eve morning, the 24th of 2023. So this video is actually getting uploaded right away. An extreme anomaly, if you will. And I'm not gonna lie. I do have a little cheat sheet this time because I'm sick of stumbling and stammering, and I'm gonna keep tapping the screen here. And I'll show it to you. It's a cheat sheet. It's just like 12 words or so. But there's some fun, interesting history that I've been learning about the Civil War. Well, including the Civil War, but about the history of Christmas that I think is really interesting. First thing I want to point out is, one thing that I always mention is that our wars are usually not our wars, or always not our wars. Now, this isn't absolute proof of anything by any means, but it's something to consider. And I want to lead off this discussion with this thought here for you. Now, going back to the Civil War, which I've been talking about a lot lately, the question here is, the first question is, who was called upon to help the Union during the Civil War? The Germans. Well, okay, let's go back to the Revolution. Who was called upon to help the Federalists win the war? The Germans, once again. Okay, well, you know, they're good friends, I suppose, really good friends, to make that much of an effort to donate towards the state. But I'd like to point out that they helped the federal or Union cause in both wars, and that's something important to think about. So the history of Christmas, I'm talking about, by the way, the history of Christmas in the U.S., not the history of Christmas overall, not from its humble and mythological origins in Germany and the Netherlands and such. But I'm talking about Christmas in the U.S., primarily kind of beginning since the early to mid 19th century and on. The first thing I want to mention is a man, here we go, a man named Clement Clark Moore. So, of course, he is the author of A Visit from St. Nicholas, or as we know it today, The Night Before Christmas. A couple interesting things about him. First thing is that I found really interesting is, and this is just sheer coincidence, but he, let's see, he was born just into the 19th century. I forget exactly the date. It's like an O something. But he died July the 10th. July the 10th, 1863, which puts it exactly 1 week from the end of the Battle of Gettysburg. So I just thought that's interesting, just because I'm a Civil War guy. Now, he's not really associated with the Civil War, of course, but he gets credit for the story. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that it's disputed. The authorship of Night Before Christmas or The Visit from St. Nicholas was not disputed during his lifetime, but it was disputed after he died, and there is still doubt, there is still question as to the original authorship. I would also like to point out that much like the Germans, he was also very pro-Federalist. In the early 19th century, Clark Clement Moore was very pro-Federalist, and that's important because I'm about to talk to somebody else who plays a very, very similar role. But let's skip ahead about 20 years. The year is, see, I just cheated, 1843, and that's, of course, when Dickens wrote The Christmas Carol. One fun note about this is it seems like one of the only strong British influences, or one of the only primary British influences in American Christmas, because so much of the influence, which I'll get into more, is German. But I will point out that Prince Albert, a German, was the one who married Queen Victoria. And this, again, I deal in intersections. I deal in dovetails of history, and I think that is one of the best ways to understand history, because if you read it in a linear fashion, by design, it won't make any sense. Okay? So there is a German connection there. Prince Albert, of course, married Queen Victoria, and he gets half of the credit for bringing the Christmas tree into the Christmas story. into popular culture. He didn't invent the Christmas tree, okay? But he brought his German culture into the palace, right? Into the royal palace, into London. And that, of course, brought it forefront, because whatever England was doing at the time, of course, is what everybody else did or wanted to do at the time. So there's a lot of credit there, but a very strong influence, you know, behind the book or outside of Dickens's book. Now this, I'm blowing by, you know, some minor details. This is not meant to be an exhaustive history, okay? This is just the parts of the history that I found interesting, okay? So we've got Clement Clarke Moore, writing The Night Before Christmas. You know, a quick note about Saint Nick, okay? Saint Nick, let me get these straight. Saint Nick is the German version of the Santa Claus story, okay? He also had an evil partner named Krampus who would punish bad kids, and I think that's very important because there's a lot of coercion wrapped up in the Christmas story as well. That's just one aspect of the coercive aspects of Christmas, okay? But you've got Krampus, the evil, and by the way, he looks like Satan. I take issue with that, and I also take issue with the fact that the Washington Post ran a front page on Krampus, basically celebrating Krampus, and it looked just like the devil. And I thought that was kind of not real cute. But anyways, so that's the German side. The Dutch side, of course, of the history of the old fables of Christmas and Santa Claus go back to the figure called Sinterklaas. Pardon me. And there's some more dark history here because Sinterklaas also had an evil villain with him. He had an unpronounceable name. Sinterklaas and his evil henchmen would bring gifts and reward the good kids, just like in the German story of Saint Nick and Krampus. But likewise, if you were a bad kid, they would kidnap you and they would take you to Spain. So that's the Dutch version. It's really not that nice when you think about it, is it? You got the Dutch version of kidnappers, and you've got the German version of punishing you with a dude that looks like Satan. So those are the fables behind Santa Claus himself, for those who don't know. The Santa Claus is not an American invention. That came primarily from the Dutch and from the Germans. So we've covered Clement Clarke Moore, and we've covered here I go again. We've covered The Night Before Christmas, and we've covered The Christmas Carol. So we are going to move ahead just a little more. So keep track of the timing. We've got 1822, we've got 1843, which brings us up to the Civil War. This is a pretty compact period of time, and this is basically when all of Christmas, just about, as Americans came to be in a very short period of time. Again, being very largely German influenced. So the Civil War comes around, of course, and we have a man named Robert Nast. And he, go figure, he's also of German descent. I can't remember if he's German born or if he was an American. I think he was an American, but I'm sorry. All right, but we got Robert Nast of German descent. And he is the person who visually, this is important, not in story, not in legend, but visually brings Santa Claus to the forefront, not just of the mind of the American public, but, you know, really kind of to the world. Robert Nast is credited with a million brilliant cartoons and drawings. He drew for the nearby Harper's Weekly, of course, Virginia's Harper's Weekly, which at the time was an extremely famous paper. Now, he was hired by Abe Lincoln, and this is a very important part of the story because I talk about ways that we get into war a lot. Robert Nast doesn't get credit for bringing us into the Civil War, okay? But he does get credit as one of Lincoln's chief propagandists, okay? And a point here being is Lincoln might strike some people as a deeply religious guy. That was not true. That just wasn't true. Now, he was about as religious as most of us. Yes, he attended the church in Gettysburg, and he attended services at important times and important holidays, so do most presidents. I'm not putting him down. I'm saying it was, you know, more or less about as maybe a little more devout than most people these days, because people these days aren't very devout at all. But one big point is, and this doesn't go to the core of his philosophy necessarily, this could have to do more with Abe's pragmatism, but Abe, when he was in Congress, he voted against making Christmas a national holiday, Okay, so that's important to remember when you're talking about Robert Nast. Abe wasn't like, I'm not saying he was against Christmas, but he wasn't like the Christmas cheerleader either. But once the war started, he did hire Nast, and Nast did him a great service on many levels. First and foremost, he demonized the South, and his most famous drawings, his most famous drawing of Santa, and maybe, I don't know if it was his first, but his most famous drawing of Santa Claus, Robert Nast, was of Santa Claus entertaining Union troops out in the field after a battle or something while they were camping out, and he has a toy in his hand, and the toy that Santa has in his hand in this Robert Nast cartoon of Christmas is of Santa holding a doll of Jefferson Davis hanging from a noose. So, of course, folks from the North, or folks who would be pro-Union, would not have any issue with that, and probably thought it was pretty funny. He did some other drawings of Christmas trees with Confederate soldiers hanging from nooses from the tree. So I'm not. This was an act of propaganda. Okay, I'm not saying Robert Nast was a cruel and horrible man. That's not what I'm saying. Robert Nast was a propagandist for the Union. So we have a lot of. It just so happens that a lot of influences behind Christmas happen to be from the establishment. I think it's safe to say, and that should come as no shocker. But just to let you know, the Christmas Story is no different. So, in my mind, those kind of form the core of